Good evening, everybody. The Music Fan is back bringing smiles to the faces, knowledge to the people, and most importantly, music to the masses. And I am back to continue my end of the year lists for 2021. So far, we've taken a look at the consensus top 50 lists from albumoftheyear.org. I've also went over my top 50 songs of 2021. And just last time, we went over not just my honorable mentions, but the ones that just miss my honorable mentions. So with all of that out of the way, now we can finally plunge into my top 50 list. Just a couple of ground rules. First, like I always say every year, I'm looking at albums, not songs. There's a lot of great songs from 2021, and you can check those out on my top 50 songs of 2021 if you haven't already. But those don't necessarily just make an album on the whole. I only look at my favorite cohesive albums. And second, and also very important, there's a lot of albums that I still wasn't able to listen to, even if I had listened to 230 albums last year. So if you don't see your favorite album, there's a chance that it might be in my honorable mentions. It might be in my honorable mentions. It might be higher up on this list. Or maybe I just didn't get a chance to listen to it. Either way, be constructive. Don't be overcritical. If you don't see it yet, just wait until the rest of these videos come out. Or, hey, just tell me what your favorite album from 2021 is, and we'll see if I've listened to it. Let's get into the list proper, starting off with number 50, which is Panopticon with their album And Again Into the Light. I'm not usually big on black metal. There's only a few albums that I can really say that I've really been able to get into, but this was a super cool album. I like the combination of black metal and bluegrass, as well as kind of like Appalachian music. The use of banjo, the use of fiddles was super cool to combine with this breaknecking pace of black metal. What I really enjoyed about a lot of these songs is there's a lot of really good building. The first song, And Again Into Light, a 4-minute song, just like starting off with that bluegrass sound, really like lulls you into a false sense of security. But even still, honestly, Dead Looms, it doesn't really start off really hard either. You kind of build into it, and that's what I really like. You're not really surprised with the black metal. You are instead kind of gradually introduced to it. So that like honestly kind of stays the whole entire way through with this album, where it's not really ever over the top of it. It always just gradually builds, especially going into Rope Burn Exit. Everything on this album, for the most part, fits very well into each other, as if this was a gradual climb up a mountain. There's also some really solid interludes later on that kind of give you a moment to breathe as you listen to a little bit more of that bluegrass sound. This still isn't a style that I will continuously get into, but I gotta commend this album because this is written and recorded by one person, and it just sounds really awesome. I would love to see this band live because this is just a really cool approach to black metal. And if you haven't checked it out, definitely do so, especially if you are someone like me who is on the fence with black metal as a genre. Number 49, we have the Pentatonix with The Lucky Ones. This is their second a cappella album of just original material, which is super cool because honestly their first one didn't really leave that much of a mark with me. There was some interesting ideas that I remember, but a lot of that album just didn't really do much for me. What's cool this time around is not only were they able to make their own original material that is honestly for the most part really solid, but also they were able to kind of keep up with the musical trends of today in their style. A lot of the pop on here, it would fit with any of the pop heavyweights out there right now. That could also sometimes be a detriment. Love Me When I Don't feels a little bit too poppy at times. Happy Now as well does feel a little bit on that more simplistic side, but for the most part it works really well. I really love the butteriness and the syrupiness of Be My Eyes. That chorus is lovely, and Kristen sounds lovely on this song. There's also the beautiful Coffee in Bed, which is about dealing with depression and trying to be there for someone as a partner who has depression, and the idea of like, if you're into too much into your head, you'll bring them coffee in bed. Very beautiful dual vocal approach from Scott and Mitch. A Little Space is really cute about falling in love too quickly with someone, or the other way around, and being like, whoa, we need to hold off for a second. Give me back the key to my apartment so that you can't be here, because this is going a little bit too quickly. Epic Signs is an absolutely gorgeous kind of rubato a cappella song that just builds so well about the end of a relationship. Never Cry Again has just so much great energy, and of course Mitch is just killing it on the vocal. And then the end, The Lucky Ones, which is a beautiful homage to where they have come from as a group. And it's just really cool to see how far this group has come, because they came from being a YouTube sensation, being on the Sing Off, and then building a lot of very short cover a cappella albums, to now putting out honestly really solid and incredible second original album. And I can't wait to see what else they do. Maybe they can stop doing so many Christmas albums, but either way, it's really cool to see how far they've come. Next up at 48, we have the aptly named Tokyo Ska Paradise Orchestra with Ska Equals Almighty. This was a lovely and really fun album that I discovered through Crash Thompson's YouTube channel. And this is the second of two ska albums that made some sort of my lists. And this one's just really fun, really standard ska, and really just beautiful and over the top at times. When they say ska orchestra, this is a ska orchestra. It hits you with all the tropes of ska, but there's also some really beautiful arrangements. Great Conjunction 2020 is a hell of a just instrumental, as well as A Touch of Spring, which is so gorgeous that you could probably have heard it on a Mario soundtrack. It just hits so well. And yeah, it's a little bit cheesy, but it's just so much fun. A lot of this album is just a lot of fun to listen to. And yeah, it doesn't really bring any sort of like crazy originality to it, but still, it just sounds absolutely gorgeous at times. Check this out if you love ska. Next up, we have Aesop Rock and Blockhead with Garbology. I have liked a lot of Aesop Rock's albums over the years, especially the one from 2020, The Spirit Guide, just hit at the right time for me. I've always liked how Aesop Rock has this just really beautiful sense of imagery, even if it is sometimes hard to interpret what exactly the message behind his words are sometimes. It's just really interesting to listen to, and this album is no different. I'll just say that comparatively to his previous album, this didn't really hit the same lyrical satiation that I was looking for from him, but it's still a really solid album. And honestly, there isn't a really bad song on this album, just a couple of really corny and out of nowhere chorus lines that just don't really go anywhere for me. Still really good. I also said that production isn't as interesting as the previous album, but still, all around, this is another really solid album from the duo. Next up at 46, we have Brockhampton with Roadrunner, New Light, New Machine. There were a few things from Ginger that I enjoyed, but as my first dive into the Brockhampton lore, it wasn't really my cup of tea. But this one hit really well from the beginning. Buzz Cut with Danny Brown is a killer track, and then combining it then with the feature from JPEG on Chain On, which is a little bit more floaty than the hard-hitting Buzz Cut, Really great start to this album. And just like what's great is that it feels like every member on Brockhampton gets a moment to shine. And with that, there is just so much diversity when it comes to this soundtrack. Another one of the songs on here that I really like is When I Ball, which has this kind of 2000s rap approach, kind of something I would hear from Kanye West on his earlier albums. I just really like the sentiment about the particular rappers on this song talking about their family, and especially their moms, and like growing up, and finding that your voice as well. Like, it's a really, really gorgeous song. Don't Shoot Up the Party is a really kind of twisted, fun song about like, why the hell are you coming to my party and shooting it up? Don't do that. The vibe there is kind of house party-esque, but also kind of sinister at times. Dear Lord is a beautiful kind of like Boyz II Men-esque a cappella song. And that leads into The Light, which is a beautifully heartbreaking closer about, from what I gather, one of their fathers passing away too soon and asking, like, why did this have to happen? A lot of really touching songs on here. Just overall really good on the diversity of sound. And I've heard that this may or may not be the last album from the group. And if that is, it is a hell of a way to go. Next up at 45, we have Phineas with Optimus. I said it before on the consensus top 50 list, and I'm doubling down on it. I think that Phineas had the better album than Billie Eilish. This one's more consistent. There's a lot more memorable songs, and honestly, the production to me is a lot better, a lot crisper, and just more consistent overall. A concert for 6 months from now is a really solid opener about falling in love with somebody, haven't seen them in a while, and we're planning on going to see a concert and potentially see this person again. But whether it's due to the baggage that this relationship had, or potentially because of COVID, they have been pushing it off, and now they're finally getting to the point where they feel like they can do this again. Only a Lifetime, absolutely gorgeous and heartbreaking, but also heartwarming song about the life that you can live and making sure that you don't waste your time, and also bringing up some ideas about existentialism, about the idea of whether there's a heaven or a hell, or if we even want to have that. Peach's Etude is a really nice piano piece. I hope that's Phineas playing, because if it is, I didn't realize that he could play piano like that. Hurt Locker, comparing a relationship to the movie The Hurt Locker. Medieval, which is about what my sense is the idea of being careful with what you say nowadays, because anything that you can say can get you in trouble. And What They'll Say About Us is a beautiful second half song about just keep fighting, because in the end we will make it, and it'll be cool to see what they say about us when we do. Yeah, there's some songs on here that I'm not like a huge fan of, but at the same time there's just a lot of just really consistent material, and it was really cool to see both Billy and Phineas doing their thing. And even though I like Phineas's work better, that doesn't mean that Billie Eilish's album wasn't good. This just happened to connect with me more than Billie Eilish's album did. So if you listen to Billie Eilish's album, didn't really find it appealing, and still want to check out some more of the Eilish work, check out Phineas's album. It was really good. Next up, we have at number 44, Haley Williams with Flowers for Vases / Descansos. This is a follow-up album to Petals for Armor, but this is more of a acoustic and folky approach. And for the most part, it works. You know, the music isn't always super interesting, but the lyrics are the things that really get me. There's a lot of lyrics about the idea of relationships and the idea of heartbreak that really just stick with me. My Limb is the one song that probably could have fit on Petals for Armor that just has this like kind of Radiohead approach that I really enjoy. It's really rhythmic at times. And it's this idea of like, if you're going to cut off a relationship, do it cleanly, because I don't want to have this phantom limb that I have to deal with. Trigger, even though it doesn't really have the most beautiful arrangement, there's a lot of really good lyrics about the idea of happiness and love and the fear of constant happiness and whether or not that's a true thing. The idea of, is it worth it to be in a relationship if you know that there will be pain at one point? Wait On is absolutely gorgeous. about the idea of whether or not you should wait for a person, because either way the sun will still show, the birds will still chirp, whether or not this person is with you, whether or not you're sad. Like the idea of staying sad just to stay sad, it's very, very sobering, but also very personable. I definitely can relate to that. And then in Ordinary, kind of one of the more straightforward songs, but the talk about her past and how it's affected her and how she doesn't want to be an ordinary person. She wants to be an ordinary for somebody, someone that can be special. There are a lot of good songs on here, but there's also just some songs that just feel a little bit too interludish or don't really stick with me, but still, as an album that literally came out less than a year after Petals for Armors, which was a beautiful and amazing album in my opinion, this is like a victory lap for her, and it still turned out to be a solid album. Next up at number 43, we have Lake Street Dive with Obviously. You know, one of these days I'm going to listen to a Lake Street Dive album, say that it might be my favorite album of the year or top 10, and actually stick by it. I have really enjoyed a lot of what Lake Street Dive has done over the last decade, and there's always a lot of times where I just listen to it and be like, yes, this is the best album of theirs, and be like, this can definitely be an album of the year contender. And then other albums come out, I listen to this one again and go like, oh, it's good, it just doesn't hit the same high as it used to. That being said, this is very close, if not the best Lake Street Dive album that has come out from them. This time around, there's a new addition to the band, Aki Burmese, who, in addition to playing other instruments, does lead vocals with Rachel Price on Same Old News, which has this really kind of cheesy at times, but just really soulful and Motown vibe as they're talking about falling in love with each other, but wanting to make sure that they keep it a little bit private because they don't want to be part of the same old news. There's a lot of really just solid, out of the park songs for this band, like always. Know That I Know, just a really cheesy but really fun song about falling in love with somebody and how they complement each other, but kind of like updating it to more nerd culture and music culture, like Didi Ramone and punk rock, or Captain Kirk and Spock. It's really fun, tongue-in-cheek, and a lot of just sassiness and silliness that I enjoy from this band. There's also a beautifully heartbreaking song, Anymore, about not wanting to fight in a relationship anymore, kind of just want to let it go. Very simplistic song, but it just really works well with Rachel's voice. There's also Making Do, which is this very bittersweet and kind of defeatist but angry song about the state of the world and how we're leaving it for other generations and how defeatist it can be at some times, but how you want to raise up and still fight for those people. Overall, really solid front to back. There's just something about this band that staying power doesn't really work with me, but I hope that someday I can be like, yeah, this is a top 25 album, or this is a top 10 album, because I keep saying it to people, and then it just never turns out to be that. Next up, at number 42, we have Esperanza Spalding with Songwrites Apothecary Lab. Just like with a lot of her recent work, this is a really interesting and out there album. The cool thing about this is, as she puts it, this was a half songwriting workshop, half guided research practice, where she worked with a bunch of different musicians in different fields, whether it's music therapy, neuroscience, Black American music, as well as Carnatic music, and made these 12 arrangements in 4 different locations. Just really, really interesting and out there. Like with a lot of her other stuff, it is really interesting to listen to, and you can clearly see that in the jazz field, she is one of the people on the top of it in terms of complexity, in terms of just cutting edge when it comes to this stuff. I will say though that unlike other albums of hers that I've really loved over the years, this one just gets a little bit too far out in left field for me at times. The approachability when it comes to musicality and melodicism is a little bit over the top, as in certain albums I've been able to recommend it to people who may or not be very accustomed to jazz. This is a very hard album that for me to recommend to other people. unless they've listened to other stuff from her first to get the more approachable stuff and then evolve with that sound. There are a lot of times where there's just really harsh tones, really dissonant chords, as well as kind of just like very stabbing rhythmic ideas. So it's kind of hard for me to be like, yeah, this is an album for you to be recommended to. But still, it's a really interesting approach and experiment, and I'm really glad that she tried it. I would love to see something a little bit more approachable next time that can still show off her use of experimenting. And finally, to close out this part of the list, we got number 41, Big Red Machine with How Long Do You Think It's Gonna Last? Big Red Machine, if you don't know about this band, it's a collab project with Aaron Dessner of The National and Justin Vernon of Bon Iver. Big Red Machine, I'm going to guess, comes from the idea that they are from the Cincinnati area, and the Cincinnati Reds once be called the Big Red Machine. That's how all this ties in. I missed the first album, and I heard that it wasn't like that great, but I wanted to check out this one because as I looked through the track list, I saw a lot of really cool collaborations, particularly Anais Mitchell on here, Taylor Swift, and Fleet Foxes. And honestly, the first half of this album is really, really good. Latter Days, a beautiful way of starting off with Justin Vernon and Anais Mitchell duetting on this beautiful song. And then you have Reese, that feels a little bit more like a Bon Iver song, especially more current Bon Iver. Phoenix, my God, is a gorgeous song. One of my favorite songs of the year, as you have seen. The combination of Anais Mitchell, Fleet Foxes, and Justin Vernon all singing together makes for an incredible experience, especially with the arrangement, and especially halfway through when you get those horn lines. A big and bold song, but they do very well in it. It's around this part where it starts to like turn a little bit, just because Birch and Renegade, they sound very similar, especially because Taylor Swift is on both of them, and the pace itself is also very, very similar, but they're still good songs. It's the second half of this album that just doesn't hit the same highs. Hoping Then does well. I do enjoy Hutch with Sharon Van Eaton on there, and Magnolia, June's a River, Brycey, and New Auburn. Good ways of ending this really beautiful album. It's just that middle part that just doesn't really stick with me as much, and it's just sad because there's a lot of really good songs on here. Like, for this to be number 41, it's kind of tough, but it just goes to show you the strength of music in 2021. So that's the end of this particular part of the list. Let me know if you like any of these particular albums and your reasons why. Also, let me know what your favorite album from 2021 was. Also, if you enjoyed this video, give it a like, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel. That way I know that you enjoy what I'm doing and want to see more videos like this in the future. So I'll be back shortly with the next part, which will be going over albums 40 to 31. Until then, this is The Music Fan, and I'm signing off.